Hi there, it is Jo from Minerva, and today we're going to look at cutting out on the bias of the fabric. When you cut fabric on the bias, you enable it to move in a different way. So the collar on this top rolls over really smoothly and it's not fighting the straight grain of the fabric. You will know how to put your pattern onto the fabric because you'll be using the grain lines, and the arrows on the pattern, they show you which way to place and in which orientation to place your piece on the fabric. Often you'll be looking for the grain lines running from neck to hem or from waist to hem, and that will be on the straight grain because you don't want your top to stretch out as it holds the weight of the fabric from your shoulders. But when you cut on the bias, you want to create some movement in the fabric. So you will be using the bias cut when you want a fabric to go around a curve, for example on a binding. Like if you want some fabric to go round an armhole, you want the fabric to be able to stretch the weave out to go round the outer edge. You might need it for a collar where you want it to roll over. You might use it on a flounce where you want the fabric to curve and spread out as the outer edge of the flounce is wider than the inner edge. Quite often, if you're cutting on the bias, you may need to stay stitch or stabilize another part of the pattern. So if you're cutting a flounce, you need to stay stitch around the edge of the flounce so that you can attach it to the length of skirt that you've got, or sleeve, or whatever other part of the top or bottom is, and then you want the flounce to be able to spread out. You might find that you're cutting a whole garment on the bias, and I've been making the Evie skirt by Tessuti Fabrics, and this is a bias cut skirt, so I'm getting movement in the fabric all across my hips and bottom, and you get a sort of fluted hem. Here's the pattern. It's easy to make. It comes with an elasticated waist or a zip opening. Now I wanted to show you how to cut it out, but the fabric is very large and the paper pieces are very large, so I'm going to show you a sort of little demo version, a scaled down model. This is the selvage edge, and that means that the straight grain is running straight from here to here, so you'll have a selvage on either side of your fabric. So imagine this is a full-size bolt. I've just made a mini version, and then across this way is the cross grain, and you get a little bit of stretch on the cross grain because the weave of the fabric allows you to do that. This is a piece of crepe, and polyester crepe is slightly more synthetic, so you don't quite see it the same, but here you will see the cross grain, and here you will see the straight grain, and it's much firmer. So that's what we normally want to work with. We normally want the straight grain to hang from our head to our toe, and we want the cross grain to go across our shoulders and bust and back so that we've got some ease of movement in our garments. But when we want to work on the bias, then we're looking for the 45-degree angle of the fabric, and there we have a huge amount of ease and stretch. And this is what enables the fabric to go around a curve or to make its own shapes. And how you get this is you fold your fabric into a square. So if we imagine here, I shall mark it on. We have a perfect square, and when we fold it corner to corner, we reveal this 45-degree super stretchy angle. I'm going to just finger press that so that I can see it on the chalk side that we're chalking on. So now this is our stretchiest part of the fabric, but it's the same here, 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 all the way. Okay, if you take that angle just slight, you'll get a slight stretch, but the maximum is called the true bias, and that's on 45 degrees. So if you want to cut some binding now, you would use your ruler and cut your binding strips from this center piece of fabric, and you can add some more if you're always using the same angle, and you can join them together. If you want to cut out fabric pieces, then you can use this line to help you. So here's a little mock-up of my Tessuti bias skirt piece. So it had a centre line down the centre, and it had 2 bias cut lines on it. And so what that means is I'm looking for this arrow. If the arrow is pointing down, that means I need the directional print to be pointing down. If I had a double arrow, then that means I can turn it either way. And I'm looking for the selvage edge to be parallel to my bias grain line. So let's turn the fabric over. Here's the selvage edge. So if we needed to place this pattern piece on this piece of fabric, I'll take an estimate first. Then we want the grain line to be the same distance from the selvage all the way down that grain line. So this is 10, 10, 10. So it's 10 centimetres, doesn't matter how many centimetres, as long as it's the same all the way down. So now the centre line of our dress isn't on the straight grain of the fabric like it normally would be. Now we've got the bias of the fabric. You tend to cut these pieces out in single layers, so that would be one, and then you could take that up and then you could flip it over and you'd put it on your other piece of fabric. You can also cut on the fold. Let's go back to the side we have the line on. So you can fold your fabric on the bias. So you can use the fold line, you put the centre of your pattern piece on the bias fold. So when you cut that out now, you'll be getting this line which would have been parallel to this piece of fabric here if it was opened out. So any pieces you can cut on the fold, so you might need some collar pieces on the fold. You don't have to fold your whole piece of fabric over. You can just fold small amounts if you want to. So if you just need an undercollar cut on the fold, then you can just do a small amount, as long as you're getting that right angle here that creates the 45 degrees. If you've cut a skirt on the bias like I have, then you have opened up the weave of the fabric. So you have the straight grain and the cross grain, and when you cut along the different weave of the fabric, then the fabric can relax and the weave can drop and fall out. So if you make a skirt or a dress, for example, then you will need to hang your dress for a couple of days and see if you get any drop on your fabric around the hemline. If you do, you can try it on, recut your hem and make sure that you've got it all level. If you need bias to go around a neckline or armhole and you can't get it out of your fabric cut on the bias because you haven't got enough left, then please don't try and just cut a piece off the cross grain or straight grain and try and put it around your neckline, because it will all ripple and it will go all lumpy and bumpy. So if you haven't got enough material, then choose either a contrasting fabric, so you've got something funky on the inside, or you can buy ready-made bias binding, and that will go around armholes and necklines and will be on the inside anyway because it's just a type of facing. If you're keen to try working with fabric in this way, here are a few patterns that you could try. So there is the Evie skirt, which is the one that I've made here. I've made it in a crepe. All of these bias cut projects tend to use a fabric that has a drape, because that's what you're trying to emphasize from the fabric. So that rolling collar, that sort of fluidity. So this is the Evie skirt. It's a skirt cut on the bias completely. There is also a Sadie dress, which is also by Tessuti. That's a sort of slip dress style, so you've got movement across the bust, the back and the hips. This one here has been used as a maternity dress because obviously you've got that movement of fabric that you can use at the front. You will have to alter the length of your front hem to accommodate a bump at the front. Here's another bias skirt. This one is using a textured fabric. This is McCall 7931, and this one has a long length, the same bias cut hemline there, the same movement across the hips, but this one is using a textured fabric. If you like and prefer using the Big Four patterns, then this is Butterick 6799, and this has two lengths, because it is difficult to alter the length of something cut on the bias because you can't just chop a bit off the bottom. So here you've got two skirt lengths, which might be helpful if you like to wear your skirts in a different style. And finally, if you want to really utilise the fluidity of fabric cut on the bias, then you can also look for patterns that have a cowl or any kind of draping feature on. This one is Vogue 1697, and here you can see it is utilised in all different places. So in the cowl drop back, you can see you've got that sort of movement on the back panel, and also you've got the bias cut creating the body form shape at the front. Most patterns, when you cut on the bias, are using a draping fabric because you're trying to create a movement. It often eliminates need for fastenings. So because you can move the fabric, you can get it on over your head and then the shape will cling to your body form. So you'll be looking for a draping fabric such as silk, charmeuse, any kind of lightweight polyester, our Minerva core range, challis fabrics and our exclusive fabrics. They all make really great bias cut items. I hope that's helped you today. It isn't a frightening thing. You just have to get your cutting layout just right. If you're not sure about getting all of the fabric in the right place, then do try and follow the fabric and pattern cutting layout from your instructions. We would love to see anything that you've made which is bias cut, so you can use the hashtag bias cut, and you can also search that to look up some inspiration from our Minerva makers. We would love to see what you've made, so do make a free account with us and upload and share your makes with the sewing community. Thank you very much for watching. Do call again soon.